We can have it all with layered prescriptions. That could be the beginning.
An ode to the layers.
Yes, odes to the layers of the many ways that we can exist as human beings, and how we can heal and how we can play, and just reclaiming all those things and remembering who we truly are.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. This is episode 2 of season 2 of the Layered Prescriptions podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kaveh Kavusi. I am joined in this episode by one of my closest friends, Gina Oades, who I've known for over 18 years now at the time of recording this episode. We speak on subjects relating to intimacy, connection, and play, but in particular, women's re-empowerment, how certain people's coping behaviors can get in the way of them actually experiencing connection. And if there's any woman that I know, Gina is one of those people who has embodied play for as long as I've known her. And I feel that she is really powerful at not only embodying it herself, but inviting others into experiencing it. And I think that's going to be something that's cultivated and experienced as a primer through this podcast as well too. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing this podcast if it resonates with you or someone that you feel it could be of benefit to. It's never an obligation. But thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing back from you. Take care. Please enjoy this episode with Gina Oades.
I'm coming in.
Okay. Should we share a breath or anything?
Yeah, let's take a deep breath.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why don't you lead it?
I will. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Thank you. So I was going to invite you to place one hand on your heart,
Where's
one hand
that?
on your lower belly. Well, you know, you're a doctor.
I met a guy with a heart on the other side yesterday.
Well, anything's possible. Feel into where your energetic heart is.
Mm-hmm.
And close your eyes if that feels good to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then on your next out breath, empty your belly of breath. And then offer yourself a deep inhale to fill the belly, the chest. Exhale out.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, likewise. And I don't know why after a breath, everything almost meshes in color. Seeing everything went from white to like a off yellow. Do you notice that too?
I don't know if I noticed an off yellow, but I do feel like the energy just got more calm, and now we're in like a fun cloud rather than like a hectic one.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think I know hectic really well, and want to start off by like introducing Gina Oades, who's the next guest on the podcast. Gina's a lovely friend of mine who I've known for 18 years now, and we started off at university together, York University, and there was 4 of us who kind of came together for initial parties, and then this big gang grew around us, probably up to like 100 people, I'd argue.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were one of the originals.
The OGs.
And then you welcomed me, and I remember your house on the other side of Jane. Gina and I have had an amazing friendship, and I've loved to witness her journey, and also some challenging times in her life that she was really open, like vulnerably, and sharing with me as she was going through the process. And I've seen her blossom then, have an experience that was really challenging, and then re-blossom, and then here she is now, glowing like I don't even need lights in this room.
Yeah, the inner glow.
Yeah,
Thanks,
exactly.
Kaveh.
Thank you for being here, and also for your friendship for 18 years.
Thanks for reminding me it's been 18 years. That feels longer, but longer than I thought. I was like, it's been 10.
Yeah. We were just one of our first mutual friends. We were at the cottage this past weekend, Mina, and he had been telling everyone, "Oh, I've known Kaveh for 16 years." I'm like, "My dude, it's 18." And he's like, "Oh," then it like hits a little differently. But I think that's one of the gifts of continuity of time, that there's hopefully beautiful points of reflection that you go back to that give you also a checkpoint to like where you are now, because maybe you've been on a path for a little while that is asking for a little, at least reconsideration or a massive deviation, that spectrum. So hopefully this doesn't cause too much of a pivot, but at least it's a point of just appreciating the journey that we've been on thus far.
Yeah, thank you.
What's one of your first memories of, I guess, our one of our first encounters?
This is so interesting that you mentioned this and asked me, because that's exactly what was coming to my mind when you're talking about 18 years ago we became friends. My first memory of you and us meeting like in real life was you wearing a very long V-neck, like a deep V, coming up to the cashier at one of the cafeteria spaces in one of the colleges. It's probably Bethune, maybe it was another one. We went to York University together, so it was one of those colleges. And I had known who you were because of friends, like the community that was being developed. We were all connecting, which was a really beautiful time in my life, because up until that point, I actually hadn't had community at university. I had just known some people. And I was starting to build these friendships. And so one of my friends, Mel, was like speaking about you. And then I was like, I think that's the Kave guy Melanie was talking about. And you were coming up behind me in the line at the cafeteria. And you smiled at me. And I was like, I know this guy. That this guy's looking at me like he knows me too. And then I don't know if we spoke at that point, but I think we did. And it was just like, hey, are you Kave? And you're like, are you Gina? And then the rest is history. And then we've been friends ever since. And then we ended up knowing all the same people, becoming the crew of people who like to party together, but then also grew together. And when you were speaking about these like different points in time and those checkpoints around, like, oh wow, okay, this is like for me, what I'm hearing is like, this is an older version of me, or a younger version of me rather. And looking at all these different points of transformation, it's like we've seen each other through all these different points of transformation, from being like people in our early 20s, like figuring out who we are in undergrad, like not knowing fuck all about life, to here we are with so much more life experience, doing what we love and still knowing fuck all about life.
Exactly. I was going to say in our 30s, barely knowing who we are still.
But being grounded in that not knowing, like being like, that's okay. Before, at least for me at that time, I was like really seeking and wishing I knew more about how to just be confident, how to be comfortable in my own skin. And if I can go back on those times, it was like people like yourself, friends like you, and the group that was forming, who really helped me like come into myself and be comfortable in my own skin, because it was one of the first times in my life that the community that I was around were people who were really affirming, like really saw me for who I am. I'm laughing only because a funny moment, and this, you might not even find this funny, but so a way that you really saw me was, you made a joke about, that show, So You Think You Can Dance? Yeah. And you said, Gina, if there was a show called So You Think You Can Volunteer, you would win. Because but it was a playful way of saying that you really saw me and how much I contributed to the world. And I probably over volunteered at that time, but like I was like, wow, you appreciated how much I gave back to the community and offered my gifts in service of humanity. That's actually how I felt. So I don't know if you remember that moment, but... Well,
the fact that it was a point that was a shift in how you had been experiencing people before to that, I can imagine how that was a drop in it. And I feel that when I'm in joking mode, I'm in this state of play that has flown and has been a place that I come and go to and sometimes used as a defense. So in that moment, if it didn't stick, I'm grateful that on my end, I'm so grateful that it was there for you, that I can re-envision that. And I really liked how you differentiated a community that can affirm you versus what I feel is very often the case, that though well-intended, unawareness can have a lot of communities be enabling people's coping behaviors in many ways, and you'll tolerate certain things in order to have physical presence without the presence that's needed to be nurturing, truthful, and integrity. So the fact that there was that affirming place for Gina's ability to just come out and smile at the hilarity and not feel attacked or offended in any way there. And I could feel like, I feel that when we were speaking back to that time, the community of people that we had, like there was no one that I didn't really trust that stayed in our circle. And I think that sometimes it's a gift, but it also creates like a delusion of the world, because it was a gift that we had, that we have people that are nourishing, playful, not taking life too seriously, still figuring themselves out, maybe hard on themselves in their own way, but like when we came together, we played and we smiled, and like there was like this peaceful, welcoming feeling that I think for myself as well, it was the first time in university that I had felt that. And when you get these points of reference, when you go through periods where you're not having that, the first thing is you're like, I know I'm not experiencing something, but also that exists. So it's something that I can come back to and maybe recreate, maybe cultivate in a different way. A lot of people will try and like recreate the past when arguably the past is dead, but we can recreate experiences or cultivate new spaces for that.
Yes, I love that you mentioned that, because it's something that's been coming up for me recently, because I think about the last several years of my life where I also felt like a disconnect from a sense of community. And you'll remember that I was in a car accident in 2015. It's a big pivotal point in my life where I was really disconnected from this community that we're speaking of, like the folks from university that we grew up together, we partied together, and then saw each other become, doctors and therapists and business owners and all that stuff. And at that time that I was in this car accident, I also was in a very toxic relationship where I had really isolated myself from that community and all my friends, because I was really absorbed in this relationship that was not serving my needs at all, until I realized. And then this car accident had pushed me into this space where I really had to take a look at my own shit and focus on my healing. And one of the commitments that I made to myself was to, first and foremost, change my life and turn this very painful time and like tragic injury, both mentally and physically, into like a triumph, right? And inside of that meant changing my environment and changing the people that I surrounded myself with. And that was also when I started to like meditate, go to more like conscious dance parties, like those spaces where people were doing conscious things, high vibrational things. And I started to meet more people who were into that. And I actually felt like there was sometimes I felt a little like isolated and triggered by it. I was like, wow, all these people with so much light. I was so used to being around people with a lot of dark and dense energy that were really like trying to convey like a bigness that was actually more than what their like internal light was fully expressing. And hopefully that makes sense. But I guess if I could sum it up, is like the people I was hanging out with at the time of this car accident, there was a lot of inauthenticity, a lot of like ego. And I say that knowing that I was also in my ego and inauthentic with myself. So when I was around more people and spaces where people were just so like authentic and in their bodies and so loving, I was like, wow, that's nice. It actually reminded me of like our community.
Yeah.
And slowly and surely I started to find myself more in those spaces. And then you were also in those spaces.
Yeah.
And this is also why we're here again, because we've sort of found, like we never stopped being friends, but we also went on our own, like you went to med school in Nevis, the Caribbean,
Nevis,
right? Nevis.
then US, and then back to Quebec.
like and then of course I just went on my whole journey of self-love and being in the wrong relationships and going through the tragic injury to kind of come back into a place of, well, what kind of people and environments do I want to cultivate for my highest good and highest evolution? And here we are.
Do you think you'd still be in those circles of people that, I mean, their presence and their heart isn't available, but their posturing, there's some ego that's there? When you say conscious, I'm thinking unconscious, I'm thinking people are protecting themselves. Arguably, they're bringing that forward, and then you don't have to worry about bringing your vulnerability forward, though maybe an inner part wants to be vulnerable and in a space for that. Do you think you'd still be in a community like that, or do you think there was some inevitability that would have brought you elsewhere?
It's hard to say. Yeah. I think inevitably your soul will bring you towards the things and the people that you're meant to be around. And for me, part of my journey is when I'm not on that right path, something happens, something big happens. When I don't listen to those pings, like, maybe this relationship isn't the right one for you. Maybe there's something else for you that's more in line with your truth and your passion, like career-wise. Maybe these friends aren't necessarily bringing out the best in you. Like I would hear those voices here and there, and like my intuition was trying to tell me something, but I would always ignore it because I wanted to please other people.
Yeah.
And then, this big car accident really put me on like the right course. So I do feel that if it wasn't that, it might have been something else. Mm-hmm. And Brianna West, a wonderful author, has a great quote: "The universe whispers before it screams." And it's like, eventually you'll get those callings, and the universe will put you on the right path.
Did you feel a scream during the car accident? Yeah.
Yeah.
What did it sound like?
Well, besides the sounds of my own screams, but it was more of a vision, actually. I had a vision flash before my eyes of the person that I was with was the person who was taking care of me, and I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't move and I was completely dependent. And it was like, that was actually the most frightening image and feeling and sensation inside of me, that person that I was choosing to love was the person who was going to take care of me. That felt very daunting because it felt dangerous. It didn't feel safe. And so that scream, if you will, that message was, okay, actually, what is more scary is that I'm choosing love and choosing to be around people who actually I'm afraid of and I don't trust, rather than actually being confined to a wheelchair. I was like, wow. So that was a big message for me, that relationships, like being in right relationship with myself and being in the right relationships with the people around you, it's paramount. It's so integral to our happiness. Like, we're talking about community. We started off talking about like our friendship and how valuable it is to be around people who we feel seen by. And, we don't always feel seen by the people who raised us, but as we become adults, we have the power to choose to be in right relationship with other people and to cultivate those connections with people that are conscious and heart-centered. And sometimes it can take a long time to find those people, but the first thing is to find yourself. And so that was it wasn't necessarily a scream, but it was a huge visual vision. Visual vision.
Yeah.
Duh.
Well, as I'm catching, and I'm not, maybe it's the first time I'm reflecting on this, that as you said people pleasing, that there was a part of you that was showing up that way in many relationships. I was trying to picture times where I had felt that you were people pleasing when you were in the presence of us, but I didn't feel that character quality or that mask, that version of you needing to show up the way that it did. I felt your presence and you were available and like immersed in the group. I didn't feel the people pleasing. Why does it not show up in friendship, but it does in relationship?
I think it can show up in friendships as well. It can show up in career relationships. It can show up anywhere. I think the difference of why I felt authentic to you and I occurred to you is that like being present and here was because there was like a mirror back of that authenticity and that connection and that trust. Whereas if you're in spaces with groups of people that you just don't feel seen by, or there again, like you mentioned, like that posturing. Yeah, I believe that was the word that you said. There is an essence of having to put on a mask to fit in. Like if you don't feel like you belong into a group, you're going to adapt, or you might, not always. Some people are totally authentic every room they step into, but
I want to meet one.
Yeah, right. We're always kind of working in between these different versions of ourselves. But if I could just speak to my own experience, when I've been in spaces where I just don't feel like I belong, there's a bit of a protective mechanism that I will put up where I'm like, okay, who do I have to be in order to just feel okay in this space? And a people-pleasing pattern, they call it people-pleasing as a trauma response. It's a protective response to try to keep people at bay, if you will. Like if you're letting people know that you can take care of their needs and avoid looking good avoid looking bad and stay looking good is a good old landmark, landmark term or distinction rather, then you actually are preventing people from really getting to know you.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel like you belong, like by being who you are, it's going to be like you're in the room naked if you show people who you really are.
Yeah, it's not because I mean I identify in certain parts of that and catching that the people pleasers like see my worth, like let me show you it, see it. So because if I don't feel worthy in your eyes, then maybe you're not going to love me. And maybe in some way that's how the child gets that conditional love instilled. And I can think back to not necessarily with how my parents were, but how a lot of people I almost see in the ER, like you'll see these micro moments of a parent and a child and how they're relating to their child, how they're relating to the parent. And you see these early moments of how the child almost tries to appease the mother with a certain thing it says or does, or father thing says or does. And I'm so curious how the generation that is coming now, where they have tools available to dialogue what people pleasing is, where there's the healthy version of that, and then there's the hurt part that is coping in order to receive some semblance of conditional love that they experienced before. And one thing that I've come to love and admire so much about your journey is how, may it be that moment where it was the car accident, but it was very likely from a long time ago. You've had the curiosities of perceiving where conditions were, but then it became undeniable and saying, no, I'm not carrying that forward anymore. And now I'm going to rediscover who Gina is in a completely different way. What does reclaimed unconditional love taste like compared to what conditional love was before?
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. And I might ask you to restate it in a moment, because I want to speak about like the conditional piece and people pleasing, because I think you spoke to the other layer of people pleasing that's very, very important. Is, when we grow up in environments where we got love because we had we did something good, we made our parents proud, we did something to take care of someone else, like then when that is like a pattern of like, I'm only lovable when I do something that's for another person. It's a conditional love, and then we carry that forward. And I definitely have had that in my own way, and I've known many people, friends and clients, that like have carried on this like, I have to do something in order to be loved. And for me, a big one was this like sense of I actually need to find love outside of myself. Like when you're talking about like you're talking about unconditional self-love, how that feels.
Yeah,
right?
in contrast to conditional love. And maybe it's something I'd love to hear your opinion as you intertwine is, who does the people pleaser tend to bring into their life? Like what's the polarization of that in the partners that they choose? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, if you are someone who abandons your own needs for someone else, you're going to likely attract someone who's extremely self-centered and likes to control and kind of play little games and things like that, because that's also, I feel like that people pleasing or that conditional love, I'm only loved if someone is showing me attention, or if someone is if I'm doing something for someone else, like you're kind of forgetting your own needs. That's very powerful to someone who wants to only get their needs met. So it's like that, I wish there was there's some kind of interesting Zen diagram or like circular
I'm
thing.
picturing it in my head as we dialogue, because the people pleaser will show up, and then there's a person who appears to have, it stays withdrawn and at a distance and says, I'm only going to be present if something is offered to me.
Yeah.
Then they take, and then this person gives. When the gift is when these two come close together at the point where they're asking the other person to hold that thing for them, hopefully in a loving relationship where the foundation is there enough, the other person can witness themselves in the ask to the other. And then the other person says, I'm not going to hold that for you. This is for you to reclaim. And that person says, but I want to please you because I don't know what love is going to be like. And the person's like, I'm going to be there for you anyway. And the person's like, whoa.
You can relax. Your nervous system. Yeah, beautifully said. I really appreciate that. It's like the balance of being able to give and receive inside of a relationship is very liberating, right? Someone who is in people pleasing, this has been this is the topical example, but there's lots of different wounding patterns that come up in a relationship that people also play out in their own like relationship to themselves. And if you're unconscious of these patterns, you'll continue to attract people who are like, what's the word? Perpetuating that same pattern, right? So whatever it is, if it's people pleasing or like very like highly toxic, volatile relationships, or very passive relationships where people don't even talk to each other, there's lots of different ways that we in our conditioning as children related to our parents and how our parents related to us, that then if those wounds are left unconscious, we just keep on attracting people who will bring out those tendencies, those patterns, and then our triggers. So like I say, full and complete unconditional self-love and the reclamation of such includes really looking at those patterns and remembering that there is a little child inside of you, all of us, like little Gina, like she experienced that feeling of not feeling as loved as her brother and her sister, right? Feeling like she was misunderstood for her emotions and her needs, all those things. It's like, I didn't want to look at it, and I didn't want to like see how my mother wound and my father wound informed my romantic choices. But when I did, and I loved myself inside of that pain, and like I went back and like reclaimed my inner child and was like, oh, little Gina, like, it makes so much sense that you feel this way. And it makes so much sense that, we would have chosen this person and that person and chose to do these things to ourselves because we didn't know better. We were stuck in a pattern. So like self-love is loving all of your shadows. That's also a big like tantric thing. It's like, it's like there's consciousness, there's sacredness in all of it, including our shadows, our pains, our wounds, our like heavy emotions. At the same way, like our bliss and our love is sacred, right? We have to love the darkness and the light for us to be fully liberated and to fully feel that reclamation. And how it feels like in my body is like very expansive, loving, but also very tender. Like sometimes I'm like, oh God, little Gina, she's and not just like little Gina from when I was like, ages 0 to 12. Like Gina from 6 months ago. I'm like, Gina.
30-something-year-old Kaveh, 35-year-old Kaveh is feeling his stuff right now.
Like it's hard work, and I speak about this because I just loved the description of like the heroine's journey and the hero's journey. Hero's journey is more of like a masculine aspect where it's like, I'm gonna get out there and change the world or conquer the mountain, like climb Mount Everest or something like this. And the heroine's journey is like that more feminine, like going into like the darkness within our own self, having the courage to traverse like our inner wounds and then come out empowered and more loving. I heard this description by my teacher, Layla Martin, who I did my coaching program with, and it's really stuck with me. And it's so helpful to have that visual, or like the understanding that the heroine's journey is like one of the most courageous things that we'll ever do, is to actually look at all of our shit. And the fact that we have shit is like, that's okay. And it's so brave to go and dive into it. And it gives you, it makes me have so much more compassion for myself when I am like going through it. And I'm like, okay, it's a heroine's journey.
And if there's this, the expression of the inner world that plasters itself everywhere on the external, for you seeing almost a projection of what's happening on the inner world there, in line with you have to address your shit. I'm giving full credit to my fiance for this. She said that if everywhere you go it smells like shit, maybe you should look in your own shorts.
Wow, I love that. It's like, what's the common denominator here, right? It's the shit in your pants.
It's like your own
of your
things
problems
that need to be addressed. And I thought, what brilliance there. Because in a lot of relationships where we carry still a lot of resentment towards other people, or even blame them for why something worked or didn't work, or maybe arguably, why didn't you receive my people pleasing, or whatever your coping mechanism was there.
Why didn't you see? Yeah.
At that point where you're closest to your person, where you're like arguably the point of maximal tension that exists between you and the other is actually the point of maximal opportunity for reclamation as well. It's just the person has the highest likelihood of having all their defense mechanisms and hurt simultaneously available. And so they are available yet completely unavailable until there's some safety that's set that's like, I'm going to melt into my ego and you're going to melt into yours as well. And you melt back into yourself. The melting of the ego is pretty much like dissolving of the armor, and then your heart or whatever hurt parts have been unavailable for a while come through. And it's not the other person that's going to necessarily hold you. It's going to be you befriending and connecting a part of yourself that has been unavailable, long forgotten, and maybe never had an opportunity to develop a deep connection with you. And I have felt during this process that a lot of the reclamation of my inner world has come through the rock bottoms. And it's intriguing that my friend Ben Rudnick and I, like, we were dialoguing once, and he said that the beauty of being a human is that we are incredibly adaptable. One of the perils of being human is that we're incredibly adaptable. So we will cope all the way down to rock bottom, and only there, when you literally have nowhere to reach, nowhere to go, nothing, no one to get help from, maybe then you see yourself, and maybe then there's a conversation, and then maybe then you reconnect.
Wow. I love that. So beautifully said. This reminds me of a journey that I did. I did a medicine journey in the end of 2022.
Pantaloc? Or, no, I'm joking.
What?
It's like what medicine journey? Some doctors might be like, what medicine? Like, Pantaloc?
What prescription was it? It was a layered prescription of a few different psychedelics. Where it's really interesting because like we're talking about, like, just going deep into our patterns, hitting rock bottom where like you have nowhere to go but to take a look at like all of your coping mechanisms, your patterns, all the things that you've been doing to keep yourself safe until you're like, this doesn't fit anymore. This actually isn't serving me, so much so that I'm now at a place where I'm like deeply contracted. And we're talking a lot about relationships, and as a sex and intimacy coach and a therapist, it's like, this is a very important topic for me. In relationships, when there is like a deep rupture, like you described, that's also like that place is you're that much closer to massive transformation. If there's two people in your relationship, can hold each other and create a sense of safety where you can melt and relax. And the medicine journey, that was what I wanted to talk about. So similar to like just we're talking about like going really deep, I felt this just always keep coming up in my medicine journeys. The sensation to me was shame, a deep like painful, like guttural, like sense of shame. That just, I felt it in like my whole like torso, but particularly like a tension in my heart. And with someone who works with like somatics, it was very, very deep and like profound, and like that sensational quality was like unforgettable. And my mind was coding it as shame. And I feel like in large part it was like a shame aspect of like the things that I've gone through, the traumas that I have gone through, and the traumas that I inherited from my lineage, my parents and other people in my family. And I touched it. I was just like, fuck, it was like I went so far down into the shame that I was like, I just kind of surrendered to it to a point it almost like felt good. Okay, just stay with me here. But something else happened to me not too long, like just actually a couple days after that journey, while I was like integrating. And in fact, I'll be integrating that journey for probably the rest of my life, was a moment with my partner, Anthony, where we were just so vulnerable and with each other. It was such that melting of hearts where we were just so with each other. And I felt so much love for him in that moment. And the feeling of it was this like feeling in my heart and in my whole torso that kind of felt a lot like the shame that I was feeling, that I was coding as shame inside of these journeys that were like so overwhelming and all encompassing. And I was like, whoa. So this is like something I've been integrating, was wherever we go outside of this, like, you know, are we in the 3-dimensional realm?
Arguably right now.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah.
In medicine space, something that I was getting from this journey was like at the core of all emotions, shame being one of the hardest ones to deal with as humans. At the core of it, it's like, it's all love.
You know, I think as you share that, how few people in the world, I think to this day, at least the way that we're experiencing it now, don't have opportunities to put the guard down for a moment based on what their government asks them: pay taxes, show up for work, have your financial things, then meet your family needs, then have your cultural needs met, your religious needs, and then have any parts of yourself left to the exploration, not just of your present, but your long ago past that is still thinks that time is now. And so you have so much of your past living in your present, and you almost have none of you available to the present because it's concerned about the future. And you have a renaissance right now, I feel, of psychotherapy that is available and is destigmatizing itself progressively in a really beautiful way. There is the awareness of how important it is to be doing things that unburden the charge that people have. And there are medicines that are having a renaissance, that have perception shifts that change the way that we relate to ourselves and have less of a charge where our inner critic, which is almost the accumulated toll of all of the people that we held in such a regard that they were able to dictate your worth, your lovability, and all of these things. But the inner critic has this accumulated thing where they're the internalized voice of others that your guilt, shame, and self-judgment, and maybe judgment, and then how you project that to the world, all reside in. And it's such a heavy gunk of the identity that needs an opportunity to be in a safe space, to be witnessed and reclaimed, or at least reassessed. And what a person reclaims there is the ability to have greater opportunity to connect to the world, but first with themselves. And the word that I was coming up for me again, that I've been thinking about when I see in the ER, where people are giving this guy who walks in, who they don't know, but is playing a role that they trust and confide in, and they'll open up these massive layers to them that they haven't shared with anyone. I've come to label it as unconditional witnessing. And unconditional witnessing is, you can see me in all of my mess and you're not going to kill me for it. You're not going to judge me for it. You're not going to, no more nurturance of that inner critic. And when there's that first place that a person has that, hopefully it's with themselves, but in relation to another, they're able to soften back into themselves and reconnect. And we have a world that doesn't encourage that. It's disincentivized, and it's not really set up in a way that you can take enough time that's required to, you have a momentous moment of epiphany that has you see yourself, you got to work the next day. And unintegrated moments of deep profundity leaves a signature that says, hey, I know that exists, but without the processing, the environment eventually ends up trumping will, and the highest likelihood is that a person reverts back to how they cope. And but I love that there's certain medicines that peel so much of you away that it leaves a signature that you have there, and then it shows up relationally, and then you can come back to it, and that thread enmeshes itself, and then you're like, wow, this is me, and I'm never letting go, in the most beautiful way. It's not an attachment thing, it's a reconnection of the highest order.
Wow. Yeah, beautifully said. I appreciate that. And also what you're talking about, like when you're going, like when one goes on these deep journeys, whether it be with plant medicine or breath work or other things that are now more available, or, wonderful relationship with a therapist or a coach, and cover something that you can integrate, that like in some ways, like only like this experience that I was sharing about the shame, like if you're listening to this and you appreciate it or you connect with it, amazing. That also, it's just something that I experienced that gave me so much more empowerment. And I didn't necessarily read it in a book. I just experienced the realization for me that I don't need to actually be so shameful and judgmental about my shame, because it's coming from a place of like wanting love, and it loosened the charge big time when I do feel a sense of like, oh, I feel bad, like, or something's like stirred up. I actually can envelope and circle all that shame with love, and remember that that's just where it all comes from. And to me, that's the integration. And I appreciate what you're saying around, you know, we have these big transformational events and then we go to work the next day. It can be so hard to integrate because we're going right back into the environments and the routines that have like kind of like deepened our patterns, our tendencies, our wounding, and sometimes we're also going back to environments that are very like unaffirming or unsupportive. And I'm big on integration, and if you can take a lot of time off after a journey or going on a retreat, really do so, because it'll help that content that came up in the journey just sit and land. But also know that integration is like ongoing. Like I think even Nico, who is like a friend and was on this podcast, said this in one of his videos, where it's like you have an ayahuasca ceremony, but your life is the ceremony. So what did you learn? It doesn't always actually come in the moment or like right after the ceremony ends. For me, when I did that journey that I was describing, I actually took like a few days to just rest and recover. And I was drawing out these new themes on pieces of paper with like colorful crayons, and I was putting it together. I was like, okay, I think I'm making sense of it. Like I actually still had more work to do outside of the session. And coming back to relationships, I did my first ayahuasca ceremony in February in Peru. And the integration had a lot to do with like showing up differently for myself inside of my own relationship. So every day is a ceremony. Every day is integration of that material. It wasn't necessarily like I came out of there and like, ding, ding, my life has changed. I just had more awareness and tools to continue to change my life each and every day, so that my existence is more loving and peaceful.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if I can speak to like another thing about psychedelics, it's we see these like videos or testimonials, and it's like, oh, I did this one ceremony, I walked out of there and everything changed. That does happen. It does happen. But it also, I think people also need to know that if you go into a medicine session, there's going to be some like dark stuff that comes up sometimes. Like it can be really hard, and the integration can take a long time. And you might not actually have that like aha moment until like 3 years later or however months. I think that's an important thing to know, that the work continues, and it's multi-layered. We're on Layered Prescriptions podcast here. So like if you're doing the work, you are doing the work in lots of different capacities in your life, right? You have a community that you trust. Hopefully you have someone else that is mentoring you, whether it be a therapist or coach. And of course I'm biased towards having a support person who can mentor you and guide you, because I have many, and I happen to be one and see myself as one for others, as well as other spaces like retreats, medicine work, breath work, stuff that really gets you into your body and out of the default mode network, so that you can reorganize some of the themes that are inside of you.
Right. I feel that along those lines, that the psychedelic space is an interesting one, because a lot of people are touting it kind of similarly to when marijuana was having its renaissance, and it was touted as curing everything and the sun. And the way that I see it utilized more often than not is no different than how people use alcohol. And it's the why behind anything that is the most important thing. If someone is using psychedelics, and it brings a lot of awareness forward, but if it remains deeply unintegrated, the why behind it probably remains just recharging parts of the ego. And the parts of the ego means the way that we cope with the world that we are continuing to exist in, the environment that we perceive, how we perceive ourselves. Psychedelics are one avenue of many to get to a place. And I would argue that the highest degree of medicine to be digested, contemplated, integrated happens with one medicine experience and a long time after. But more importantly, even a long time before. Because if you're on a whim, you're like, you know what, I feel like going today. Chances are you're trying to get away from something that moment. And I'd argue that that the medicine will be forgiving of you to an extent, but also after a while, there's no drug on earth that you take the same amount of and it takes you to the same place. When you're getting away from a part of yourself, you almost arguably have to, the Coolidge effect, you have to take more in order to reach the same thing. If psychedelics were to be seen with the renaissance of perception, which is like, what a gift that I can see layers of myself in that moment, for example, that you introduced where you saw shame with your partner. There was a point of reference that the psychedelics had pulled some layers, some parts of you back to bring the offering of as disgusting, as uncomfortable, as difficult, as inexplicable as shame was in that moment for you. It brought a point to say this can be available for you to perceive in your life as well too, and address it. And I feel that that's where we can thank the psychedelics, put the phone down, and not say, I have to come back to you again. I'm so glad that I saw you. I'm coming to see you. I'm going to see you every week. And blah, blah, blah. Because then psychedelics end up being overutilized, over-depended upon, and the medicine is missed. Because again, it comes in that space, I feel, before, during, and after that is intentional. If we are wired as animals to be habitual because that's more energy preserving, for us to not think, to be in automatics. The intentional life, I would love for the intentional things that are in integrity, truthful, relatively calm, if they fall into the automatisms, beautiful. Like if you are automatically nice to people and not conditionally nice to people, that's a pretty nice thing to do. Why it sucks kind of that we have to think of the world where like most of the transactions of humans are conditional and once in a while you're intentional. And most people are only intentional literally when the way that they're carrying themselves in their life has the opportunity of it being pulled away from them. Now they're more open to the possibility of being more humane, more considerate. Do you remember when when COVID came around?
Yeah.
Do you remember how callous people on AirBNB were before the entire system shut down? Then when you were trying to rent things during COVID, how nice they were again? It's because their revenue, like their ego had been snapped of, oh, I'm so important. Like my property is essential and people, I can be an asshole to them. They forgot the human component. And then I saw these people so like loving and nice and considerate and I don't know what the right word is, but they had their own wake up call. And I feel that there's very few places for that in society because we actually create a lot more distractive spaces that you will have other people who enable and encourage you to continue to not see yourself.
Yeah.
And I might end up cutting that part about the AirBNB thing because it doesn't matter. But I was just remembering that feeling of how frustrated I was when people were so rude on these, because they didn't. You need to like snap people out of the automatism of how they're behaving. And these medicines invite you to first do it with yourself.
Yeah. And these journeys. Yeah, again, whether it be with psychedelics or another experience that gets you into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, it can be a window into a new way of thinking and behaving.
Yeah.
And, the mystical experience or like the deep, like going into like the autobiographical, like trauma that you experience as one experience. To allow you to look at things in a new way or have new insights and perspectives. That's very powerful. It's super, super powerful. But how do you take that and then be a better person? Yeah. Like be a good person.
And how do you reclaim the pen? You're saying the autobiography. Whose pen was it? Whose book was it?
What can you write now? Like who's writing the rest of the chapter of your life? Like, again, I'll just use, because I mentioned this like shame and the love, and it's all feeling the same. Like for me, it's like, am I going to allow myself to just swim in the shame and be like, oh my God, everything's bad, I feel so terrible, to then now, I picked up the pen and it's like, okay, I can love my shame. I can love myself in that. And now I can choose a life and write this next era, this next volume of my life that is so much more filled with like love, love, acceptance, clarity, compassion, forgiveness. Like those sound like those are virtues. And I would wish I could say that I was really in those for a good part of my life, but I really wasn't. I was very much like in my shadows and like stuck in like shame spirals and, perpetuating old patterns, and I'm this isn't, it's common. It's common. And I had to rewire all those things. And psychedelics was one of the ways that helped me, but it also was sat on top of all this other work that I did, like therapy, coaching, doing a lot of like trainings and things that were supporting me to help other people, but had to got me into looking at my own shit. So I think you were saying a moment ago where it's like the integration like comes after, but there's also like the stuff that came before. Yeah. So yeah, all of it is important. I guess the main message here is you got to do the work. Yeah. And you can't just put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to healing. You've got to really be intentional with the prep and the integration and how you are living your life every single day.
Have you ever met like a 2 or 3 year old that journals?
No, but that would be cool.
Because now that you've said this autobiographical thing, it's really struck a chord where if we were to look back at what 3-year-old me was saying, or 2-year-old, it would just be mommy mad. I took cookie. And like, and maybe it's not even words, it's like a picture, sad face thing. But that's where our foundations of our psyche jumps from toward and propels us towards today. That was one of those things. And in re-exploring and re-examining it, there's this reclamation that can happen. But I think of how many, again, like the ER is this incredible temple that you see people in their vulnerabilities, and you see adults, you see elderly who are, you could not tell if you were to differentiate, if their voice was not the same and their appearance was different, it would be no different than a child. And their childlike essence is coming through, and maybe their childlike horror is coming through because of the fear of imminent death or the fear of imminent loss of one of their family members, or the perception of what their life was going to be like. And when you take them out of the hospital, you have people who are running countries who have a lot of unprocessed stuff, for example. And I can only imagine what a world we would be in if the incentive wasn't the current like value metrics that we have in society. We have ones that like say, you're gonna die one day, I'm gonna die one day, we're all gonna die one day, and we all won the biggest race of our lives, which was like beating the other 200 to 500 million sperm to inseminate that egg. And now we get to live this honeymoon or the victory lap called temporary human life. And then there's like this arguable extrapolation, which is even more meta, that I've only come across first in psychedelics, which is when you look up in the sky and you see the stars, those are constituents of what makes us. And for a moment we coalesced with all of the ingredients that exist in nature and the universe into a living, breathing being that is able to conceptualize and consciously experience life and go from the spectrum of absolute horridness to the orgasm of it. If we like, how magically inexplicable and mysterious and astonishing is that? And we live in this, and it's almost like disincentivized to think wondrously like that. If there was a reprioritization and a renaissance of that on a governmental level, because they're like the caregiver archetype who decides how the world's going to be. I know it's going to end up having to start at our level, where we remind individuals while we're reminding ourselves of how wondrous life can be. Because I even feel like when I go through periods of working a lot, I'm feeling less of the wonder, and then there's something that wakes me back up, and conversations like this are waking me back up, and I'm feeling like a fuel. But I don't know how, like, I mean, I told you before we came here, I was listening to this book about like how not too long ago life was, get that coffin.
I'm still, no, I just wanted to look at the time, sorry. Okay,
Sure.
keep going,
No, just I sometimes grieve at how a lot of people don't have permission to the depth of what life can be. How, like, if anyone knows Gina, she dances her butt off. There's only one person I know who dances more than her, or actually as much on par, but he disappears. She stays with the group. His name is Albert Hung.
Albie, yeah.
Yeah, and Gina is a masterfully immersed dancer. The conversations are of the highest order as well too. And if you see an adult who's playing, even before her accident, this was the accident that you define. I remember that, like, if there were top 3 people I knew who were showing up as a human in all of the most important ways and also all of the most playful ways, which is also so important, it was you. And like in hindsight reflection, it's that. And I struggle to believe that just because we're getting older and life is continuing, that we have to lose any of that.
Woo, okay, this is great. Let's talk about play and pleasure and reclamation. Well, we're past the shadow stuff now. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for seeing that. No, it's always there. Yeah, we love the shadow. We love
shadow,
all the, yeah. We're just, there's just more that I want to share around, like, you know, we are so miraculous. And there's so many parts of us that are incredible and sacred that we have in our society been made to see as like demonized and dirty and things like sex and orgasm and pleasure and like being sexy and being in your body and being like just like wild, which I like to think comes out in my expression when I allow it to, when I give myself permission, you know, when my shadows and all my voices are not like getting at me. But that, like, the true essence of who we are as humans is like that beautiful, like unbridled joy and pleasure and playfulness. I do believe that. And at least for me, when I'm feeling the most myself is when I'm dancing, when I'm laughing, making jokes, and when I'm having orgasms and having sex and like being really in love with my partner. Because those are those things that are just so like, they're so delicious, you know? And then I say that knowing that I also feel very much myself and happy in like the mundane moments and I'm just petting my cat and, you know, taking a nap. But this expansiveness of just being human, like that celebration, it's like, damn, like reclaiming that is really important because this rat race and this, you know, way of life of like producing and achieving and like going to work every day and offloading our power to the authorities and to, you know, to other things and other people making decisions. It's like, well, what about being in our bodies and choosing the things that we want and to explore and expand in a way that feels good for us. And I hope this is making sense, but if I could just share how this has like landed in my life, is I felt for many years I was like, I gotta go to school, I gotta get a good job, I gotta work full time, I gotta get a job with the benefits, and like, okay, then I'll have made it, even though I knew that it was like, that's not really like, that's probably more, but that was just what I was fed. And if I'm valuable, if I'm working to the bone and putting in overtime and forgetting all about my own needs and my own pleasure, like I was like my own rest. Yeah, it was very much in that like the yang energy that's not healthy.
Yeah, yang is output.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we can chat more about that too. If you want to work one-on-one with me, and if you're a lady. But truthfully, like the yin that is like that being more in your feminine and in that like creative flow and in your pleasure and in the feelings. I was very disconnected in a lot of ways from that part of me because I was so like gung-ho about achievements and doing the right thing and doing what the government wanted me to do.
I'm sorry that I keep mentioning government.
But like the whole, like the system. And it's radical to, like, it shouldn't be radical, but it's because part of our human experience to just be in a place of celebration and love and enjoyment and and play.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I believe makes us even more effective and when we're in our yang and when we're in service and we're getting into the contribution to the larger world, is did we give ourselves the gift of just being, because that's what fuels the yang energy.
Yeah.
Is the yin. And then the yang is also like a part of the yin. Like we need both. We need balance. And we're a little bit out of balance. If I think we're a lot out of balance. But this has been a part of my reclamation in my life, is to like honor when I need rest, honor when I just need to like play and dance and release and just be and like forget the to-do list. Because the to-do list is going to be there. But what about the now? The enjoyment and just being human. And of course I could go and talk about this forever, but yeah.
Well, I think about how adults make children like over time graduate from being a child when they lose their childness, which is the capacity for just immersed play and in the land of the timeless. Adults live by time, with checklists, with responsibilities, and devoid of a lot of play. And where they seem to come back to life, even in latter years, you see with some elderly people, the moment a song comes on and it reminds them of a moment that they just got back into the timeless, got back into the immersed, got back into the play, they came alive again. And what we just discussed was naturally inherent in all of us at some point. And then all of us slowly over time subscribe to saying, hey, life can't always be this way. There are these responsibilities or these things we have to have. And a lot of that play gets robbed. And, interestingly, I got an email a little while ago, about 2 weeks ago I found out that there's this Canadian medical doctors soccer team. And cool. I'm like, what? How did I not know about this? I want to play. And the guy, he messaged me and he's like, I would love to actually do a study on this because I've seen that a lot of these people who are on the team have said that they've came alive again. And he's like, they seem to be doing this thing like unintentional wellness. I'm like, you know what a child would call unintentional wellness? They'd call that play.
Yeah, playing in the sandbox.
And he's like, oh my
around.
gosh. He's like, that's what we need to name the study.
Yeah.
And it was like revelatory for him. But I was like laughing. I'm like, this is, come on, man. That's what that is.
Yeah.
But he's, bless Paul's heart, is a very high achiever. Mm-hmm. I wonder what pause looks like for him. But I know what play feels like for him because of what he's been expressing there and what it revitalized, not just in him, but in a lot of people who have high achieving, high profession, high demand, high profession identifying and high demand responsibilities that leaves no time for that. But like if there was everyone, I think, who's, I hope, listening, reconsidering what play looks like in their life right now, if it's there, if not, literally get up and move somewhere and do something. How would you invite someone into play in this moment as a curiosity, even if from the spectrum of they're already playing to someone who doesn't play at all?
Yeah, for someone who doesn't play at all, one way and one consideration is to like really close your eyes and remember what was something you really loved to do when you were a little kid, or if maybe you didn't even get to do that thing that you wanted to do. What was it when you were younger that you really wanted to be or to do and you just really wish you could just do it, right? Maybe it's like, I just want to play drums, or I wanted to dance more, to sing more. Like just go and do it without like putting conditions on it, like to being like, oh, I have to be good at it, or I need to do it for achievement, just to do it, just to expand, just to be in that expression.
Yeah.
Something for me was like I liked to sing when I was little, But somewhere along the lines, I was told multiple times that I was too loud, be quiet, shh. And more than one person probably told me I didn't have a very good voice. So then I stopped singing. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start singing for fun. And I'm not on stages or anything like that, but I love to sing karaoke. I love to chant. I love to sing by myself. I love to sing in the shower. I love to sing in the car. And whenever I do, I just feel so good. Yeah. And also, like the throat chakra, when that has been blocked or you've lost your voice, like just using your voice and making sounds and not judging how it sounds, not doing it to be good or to get validation is so rewarding and a part of reclamation. Also, like the throat is very much connected to the cervix. You could read some stuff on that as well. And so like some pleasure. There's that vagal toning, and it's so healing to just be able to sing. And for me, that was a part of play, was like reclaiming something that I lost because I felt like, punished or shamed about it and insecure, and just to reclaim it as a sense of play. Yeah. And for people who are you said for people who are already playing.
Yeah, I was just talking about that whole spectrum.
Yeah. It's just to allow more space for you to play and to see where else can you let go. And like we're talking about like sex. That's one of the reasons why people have sex, is to actually like let go and like be connected to source energy. It's not just about having an orgasm or getting off, right? But that can also be a place where you like let go of like the timelines and the goal directedness of like getting to the point of climax, and just be in a sense of play with another person and with your own body and with your own like sense of energy. That's a lot of fun. I feel like you can bring, I would love to see more people and invite more people into relating to sex and sexuality and pleasure from a place of playfulness rather than like a chore, or there's a lot we could talk about there. And also to see it as also a healing, a place where healing can occur too, right?
Well, I think talking about sex is it'd be the first time I do it on the podcast, really, but I feel that it's an incredibly important one. So many directions to probably take it, but what you were saying, I think, is a really good primer where at least I can speak from myself first, is that when there are life burdens or life challenges, the desire for intimate immersion gets infringed upon.
Definitely.
And I don't know if it shows up the same way in women, but as it does for men, and it will almost necessitate from myself, the times where I'm most available to be intimate are the times where I'm least available to the parts of myself that show up in the world. So it's almost like in this hypnagogic state just before I fall asleep and I'm into my dream state, or right when I wake up in the morning to just before the brain starts revving up with all the responsibilities. And I don't know if this is, I sometimes wonder if this is by design, like on an evolutionary level, and I'd argue that it probably is. But this is what frustrates me about the variables that we unnecessarily add stress-wise for the short time that we're alive. Because a lot of men, myself, I'll come back to me because I want to make sure I'm not speaking on behalf of them. Well, where intimacy is this beautiful immersion of where you taste connection, where you feel support, where you feel play and immersed. As these responsibilities start accumulating, intimacy can start being used as the way to get back to connection, and it almost like does this egoic washout until the egoic washout isn't enough and there's still a layer that's there, and then you're like, hey, intimate partner, you're not doing it for me anymore. But it's not them, it's you in the way of yourself. And what you were saying about there's love at the bottom, like actually it's love everywhere, but it's that connective layer is a bridge back. And I feel that at first I'd just love to start by saying thank you, feminine and women, for tolerating maybe where men were unaware of this, and they maybe tried to take in order to reclaim sense of connection to themselves, and they were willing to go through her, metaphoric her, in order to clear some of his ego to come back to connection. But where there's a day that arrives where you're with a partner that says, I invite you to presence. And in that presence, the ego doesn't even have to be there. And so you are connected. And so there is love. And so there is intimacy. That's a rare place that I feel like I'm familiarizing myself more over time. And it's more challenging as I'm more aware of it, because I see the world that's out there that demands, I feel like I want to address all of those. And then it leaves difficulty for the sex part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if I speak on behalf of many men, or maybe I don't.
Well, thank you for the vulnerability, for sharing that. And I think your experience likely, I mean, I guess you could only speak on your experience, but for sure there are other people that feel similarly, and it's important to share these stories and be open around, be more vulnerable around the dialogue around sex and sexuality, especially for men, because like the patriarchy has also hurt men too, where like this, that connection to yourself, to your vulnerability, that your feelings, that intimacy, that isn't always supported in society. It's like about being like, a producer, provider, and taking care of other people, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really value you sharing that. And I want to say, I completely agree. And it goes for women as well, around when your life circumstances are stressful and you have a lot on your plate, work-wise, time-wise, energy is zapped, even like the environment that you're in. If like your living situation is precarious or not bringing you like a sense of stability and health and vitality, that impacts desire for intimacy, availability for intimacy. And so when we're talking about play and like just enjoying and being with our human experience, it's also like, well, what's the environment that we're living in? What are the, and Emily Nagoski, who wrote the book Come As You Are, one of my favorite books, required reading for all people, I think, particularly women, talks about like the sexual accelerators and the brakes. There's things that put the brakes on desire and feeling safe to be intimate and to feel like ready to have sex and open for it. And then the accelerators are like the stuff that like, right? It's like what makes you feel safe. For me, what puts on the brakes is overworking, not having energy, not feeling heard, bad lighting. And all these are your own, everyone is an individual, right? So it's not the same brakes and accelerators for everybody. Things that, put on it, the accelerators go off for me are really good lighting, feeling seen, like being able to express myself energetically, like being able to being comfortable in my body. A sense of like when touch is really slow and sensual, like these are all the things that I have reflected on for myself, and I help other people. It's like, what is it that we really like what really turns us on? What really helps us feel open and safe to be intimate and to feel close, to be safe enough to allow you and another person to merge. Right? There's like the quickie and like just get it done, or like just do it whenever you can, or have sex when you're drunk or under the the influence. I know that's something that was like really rampant in my 20s, right? But now like that reclamation of like how wonderful intimacy and sexuality can be from a place of like play and letting go is supported by really taking a good look at, well, what do I need? Like, what do I need? What things like hinder my ability to really be present with myself, with my body, and with my partner? and learning how to ask for that, and learning how to prioritize these things in your life so that you can prioritize intimacy and pleasure and sexuality, because we all need it. We're so starved for pleasure, and pleasure is so important for healing. And I say this often to myself and to people in my life and clients, is like, when we have trauma, it disconnects us from ourselves and it doesn't feel good. But we also need to feel good, find ways to feel good. And doesn't necessarily we all need to go and have sex and heal our trauma, but like understanding what in our environment creates a sense of safety, sense of pleasure, because we're allowed to also feel good. We're allowed to be embodied, because that's also part of the healing. If we're only feeling crappy and we're not going to be able to find that balance and to heal.
Sounds like sex is a psychedelic experience, right?
It is. It's a non-ordinary state of consciousness. Yeah. If we saw it like that, we would probably like create more of a
sacredness around
it. Yeah. An environment that support it, relationships that support it. Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Imagine someone just comes like off the street, does ayahuasca, and just gets up and walks back out and just leaves the depth of, and then goes right back to their life. I'm sure that happens in many instances where people will do like weekend retreats in the same light as psychedelic experience where you have a quickie with someone. This is why I keep thinking an unintegrated psychedelic experiences reinforces the ego. Is that the person almost does this little washout of the ego, and they're like, oh, I feel revitalized. It's the cocaine hit. I'm good for a little while again. But then, just like everything that is unintegrated, it creates a dependency. And some people may use sex as the drug for them to not see themselves and reignite their ego. And then after a while, if that doesn't work, they may reach for other substances. And I think a lot of men especially will reach for molecules that inflate the ego, like cocaine. Don't even question it any other way. That's what it is. Alcohol, which inhibits your connection to yourself and inhibits the sense of the expression of the burden of the ego that's carried there. And then if it's not that, it can be other tools for escape, working more. A lot of people overwork as a tool to escape from themselves. But most importantly, you don't need to reach too far. You just reach into your pocket and you don't have to feel anything anymore. You can just distract yourself, literally get away. Yeah. And it's an astonishing thing to witness in children, where I've had a kid who came into the ER, broken leg, and before we could get an IV into him to give him any meds, just mom put the phone in front of him in her desperation to figure something out. And it was better than ketamine. It was more effective. And that just tells you how much the reward pathway in our brain gets satiated, where we don't have to feel our stuff. And so if you think about the person think about this, please, if you're ever considering being intimate and your phone being nearby, go on your phone right after and see what it does to your body. The medicine of the intimate experience literally is robbed almost immediately and replaced with something else. And I think where we digest, if you don't have the reward that comes through digestion, contemplation, integration, you'll only tolerate and seek new and experiences that give you these hits. And then because there's energy that's required to digest, contemplate, and integrate, because it's that energy burdening and you don't feel the reward of it, you'll almost replace it with another thing, and then you'll go for the phone or whatever. I feel that the sanctity of sex can be robbed in nurturing that, and also reclaimed in nurturing another way. And I'm for that renaissance.
Yes, I'm for that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And it was something that was coming to me as well, where it's the big word that's coming to me is intention, right? Sex, just like other drugs, when the intention is not what I'm talking about, to expand and to really deeply connect with the other person and yourself, it's just another thing that you're chasing to increase, like, the chemicals in the body, and then you're out there back into your old patterns and like chasing that same hit of dopamine, oxytocin, all the things that kind of arise inside of the experience. But it can be so much more than that when we engage with sex with the intention of expansion, connection, and healing, then it will be that experience. If we're engaging with sex as like a coping mechanism, like a hit, what is it? Stick it and hit it or something. Hit it and leave it. I don't know. There's a like
a dine and dash.
Yeah, like a dine and dash, right?
Stick and dip.
Or to fulfill like a very like ego-centered need. Yeah. Then it's going to be that. It's not going to be the expansive experience that maybe what we're talking about, and that takes a shift. It takes a whole shift first with ourselves to realize that it can be a different way, and also if you're wanting to undo those patterns of like just doing it for like the rush of it, for the game, for that coping, for a distraction, you have to take a look at, well, what is that serving me? How is this serving me? It's doing something. And I've been there. It was like, I felt very powerful when I could just, have sex with whoever I wanted when I was like single for a good amount of time. And I realized it was just actually preventing me from actually looking at my own shadow and vulnerability. And it was a distraction. I realized I wanted to reclaim sex as a deeply sacred, healing, expansive, connected experience. But I had to take a look at all my stuff and rewire it and choose a different way. Right. Choose a partner who could meet me there, and to choose myself, to choose being embodied and loving and centered rather than seeking.
Well, what are your thoughts on the partners? Because, with partners, over time, there can be a resentment or a layer that starts being created between them. And then intimacy is difficult to reclaim. There's something about partners who are able to work through stuff that they don't have such a charge that's accumulated that either intimacy no longer exists, or the person may go elsewhere and almost get that sense of what they were initially experiencing with their partner, which now is either unavailable or they're not putting effort towards it, whatever it is that's creating that space. How do you reclaim that? Yeah,
that's an important question. Two people have to want to reclaim that first and foremost. And something about long-term relationships that's important to like identify is that, we can get into a realm where people are so enmeshed with their life, like, you're kind of entitled to someone's space. And hopefully I'm saying this right, but like if you are in a relationship where you're seeing someone all the time and there's no like separation, that desire can become like squashed. You need to have a little bit of like separation in your own life. Like it's very much an Esther Perel thing. But if you're talking about like resentment or ruptures inside of a relationship that go unmet or unaddressed, that is a level, ruptures, that is a level of like emotional unsafety and emotional disconnect. And I think all people, whether male, female, non-binary, an important aspect of intimacy is emotional safety. Do I feel safe to be vulnerable with this person? So if you have an unaddressed rupture that just goes on and on and on, and you don't actually take care of it inside of your couple bubble, then you're not going to have emotional safety to feel close and connected. And then, to be sexual and intimate with someone in that way, you do have to have that sense of safety. Safety. I've said safety like 5 times in the last 30 seconds because it's so important. And so to repair that and to rekindle and reclaim it requires 2 people, if you have 2 people in your relationship, to be willing to repair, to be willing to look at like, okay, well, what has actually transpired inside of this relationship to create this rupture, and to do the individual work to see like, okay, what was triggered inside of myself to contribute to this rupture, and what do we need to do as a couple to repair. And I feel like being able to repair after a rupture is a very, very powerful tool, if you will, inside of long-term relationships or any relationships really, that can support ongoing intimacy, because you're going to get into arguments and ruptures with your partner regardless. It's just it's just a part of life. So how do you do that? How do you repair? So, finding ways. You can get a therapist, you can get a coach, you can do the work, go to a retreat, try to create a safe space and a ritual to reconnect and to check in, and to repair that emotional safety so that two people can find that connection again.
Yeah.
So that, to speak about like resentment and repair, that's a
couples
fairly,
therapy really stands
therapy.
out because there's that objective third who's there, who just hears as the dialogue is unraveling, that they may hear a part that either of them, because the guards are up in a certain way, the defenses from both people are up. The objective third can step in there, and there's a receptivity, I hope, for people to hear. I've heard of other people who have gone to couples therapy and people have walked out over and over again. And it's a pretty common thing because they're being witnessed, not just by the person that they've trusted to be witnessing, but now this third person, and they must be wrong. And but they're actually bringing you to see yourself. And the gift is in that moment, again, in that point of maximal tension, is the point where you have the greatest opportunity to reconnect to that sacred, that part of you that is sacred, that is unavailable and is yearning to reconnect. And it may require a deep grievance of some heaviness. And I think with a lot of men, there's the shame of, well, here, I'm going to again come back to myself. I feel like it's an armor that's been carried for a long time, and how we need to show up to the world. I can say in the past year, with how inflation happened, maybe this, when someone's listening to this podcast, I'm long dead and they don't know that Canada went through this pretty rough inflationary part. I bought this house at the top of the market, and getting at a variable interest rate, maybe this is like, it's like not as esoteric, but it's real life stuff, is it almost doubled the cost of life. And what a travesty, I think, to always be consumed thinking about a thing that is so not real to value metrics of what life is, which is connection and presence. Like I've had a renaissance now of thinking that the person who tells me that they make so-and-so or they do so-and-so, I want to hear what that is in relation to their capacity to be connected to life and be present for it. Because if they've made all these monumental things, if I've made all these monumental things and have these things that I can tell you about, but I can't actually be present for, I feel that my bank account is empty as far as I'm concerned. And I'm tasting what that feels like. And it's something that I want to, in addition to supporting myself, to get clear on how I nurture that bank. If I were to say something, a bank of presence that I can always come to, and it's available for me and for the world. How I can support others in that as well too. And I feel like that's a project I'm working on right now. Is called Resus, which is like the resuscitation of the healthcare worker. But I feel like it should be anyone in service of other. Because I feel like those are the people who offer most and have little left for self and other in the world. And I feel like it's a big renaissance that's needed, because intimacy is hindered, but the intimacy of life itself. Like if Nico says, if you go ayahuasca is the ceremony, then life is the ceremony. No, you can have intimate experiences, but there's the intimacy in every moment. Yeah,
I love that. And talking about like rekindling and reclaiming desire and connection inside of a relationship, it again also starts with like reclaiming connection with your own self, with your own body,
relationship to self,
finding pleasure. What like, or how you're talking about, like, life demands and work and stuff that like takes us away from just being in our bodies. We work so hard to amass wealth and to have income. That's all fine and dandy, but like, how are you using that to nourish and enrich your life? Right? There's like probably a study, I feel like I've heard this quoted on podcasts before, where it's like, people at their end of their life are interviewed and they're asked like, what is your biggest regret? And it's like, well, I wish I didn't work so much. Right? I wish I didn't, I spent more time with my family, my partner.
Well, I've asked that in the ER, right? In people's last
Of course
moments.
You did.
And like, I don't think they have words for a lot of it, because a lot more people maybe in the ER is a different setting than if they're up in the ward or in hospice or palliative care at home in their bed. But what I do see is as people are getting close to the end, the thing that matters, whether they perceive it to be true or it actually is connection is what matters.
Yeah.
And did I love well? Did I love enough? And then I'd argue the hippie thing that comes through is, did I know that I myself was love?
Yeah.
And like, whoa, that is
right.
a big one.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of a lot of psychedelic experiences, I keep coming back to this. You go through this triumphant journey there's so much seriousness that you realize is not serious at all. And you get to this thing that, again, my friend Ben, I don't know if he has coined it or if it's what it is like known as, is like the big Buddha laugh. Just picture this big belly Buddha who's laughing, saying you took life so seriously when it was all play, and it's just an opportunity itself. Like, and just you see the grin, and it becomes a symbolism, like a point of reference that I come back to. And if that can be an invitation for many to like reclaim their capacity for presence in life, play will ensue, connection will ensue, love will ensue.
Yeah.
And you'll also be all of those things without having to think about it.
Yeah. Wow. Play, presence, pleasure, connection. Yeah. All that is available to all of us. And doing the work, the hard and necessary work of loving your shadow and your darkness is a part of that too.
Yeah.
We can have it all with layered prescriptions. I had to sing at least for one
I know.
second.
I was waiting for you to just keep going in.
Right. Go into that could be the beginning.
An ode to the layers.
Yes. Odes to the layers of the many ways that we can exist as human beings, and how we can heal and how we can play, and just reclaiming all those things and remembering who we truly are. Because before life circumstances had us forget, we are full presence, whole, perfect, complete, and pure love. And I have to remind myself of that all the time when I'm in my shit, when I've, metaphorically shat my pants and I was like, what smells? And it's like, oh, it's my fucking shit again. It's like, okay, wait, hold on. I got to remember who I am. I'm whole, perfect, and complete. Everything is good. Yeah. And then using those tools and all the things that help me come back to being in the now and present. And I feel like even saying that sounds a little bit like out there and esoteric, but I feel like both of us have done some deep work to get here and to understand what that actually feels like. And I hope that anyone listening to this podcast has
well, I wonder if there's anyone from my environments that I work in would even make it this long in a podcast that has this type of cacophonic, tangential nature on subjects that, after a while you're like, what's in this for me? And if no points of what's in this for me get touched, a person stops listening. But I feel that the longer you stay in things that aren't, it's not that they're disinteresting, it's just that you haven't seen the reward of what comes in from developing a relationship of things that are like, hey, look at yourself, look at this, look at that, look at that. It's so much easier to just look away, be distracted, and be entertained. And what's a lot of the world asking right now? Entertain me.
Yeah. Quickly, now, without me putting in any effort.
Yeah, so more than ever, people who are saying yes to self-exploration and curiosity and moments of contemplative digestion and contemplation
and contemplative integration.
Contemplative integration.
Digestion. Layered prescriptions, all the above.
Hey, I always say, I'm like, experience, contemplate, digest, integrate.
You're so good at putting those together.
Well, then another one's Beto. Beauty in the ordinary.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Beauty in the ordinary. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah,
that's a prescription in the ER. I'll write like the prescription pads. I'll write one on the other side. Like, these are the prescriptions I could have written to you, and you know what? I'm writing them anyway. People are so blessed to have you as their ER doctor. If they're getting competency, they should go see another doctor. I'm coming to talk to them about the fluff.
I see. We all need each other. We all have an important role to play. And
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're doing in your life and bringing like that, humanity and spirituality to your work. At least
Yeah.
I feel like perceive that you are, and creating conversations that are real.
Yeah.
Very, very real and very important. And hopefully, if you have listened to this podcast all the way to the end, you've gotten something out of it and hadn't been distracted too much by your phone. And, I salute you.
Yeah,
and I'm
I
grateful.
salute you if you were able to also listen to this all the way through. Gina, where can people connect with you, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so people can connect with me through my Instagram. I'm at Gina Daring Greatly, posting mainly things about my coaching work, which you can learn more about on www.ginamarie.ca. My coaching right now is focused on supporting women, high-achieving women, reclaim their sexuality and enhance love and intimacy in their life through somatic coaching and a tantric approach, which I've been trained in and live and breathe. And then also, if people are interested in learning more about some of my group offerings, I host events that incorporate meditation, yoga, breath work, sound healing, all things that I do too, because I just love doing so many things. You can also follow my Instagram for that as well. And my therapist website is under development, but you'll be able to find me on the internet through a group practice called Changing Waves, Neurofeedback and Psychotherapy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for the years of friendship. And I'm looking forward to so much more of the inexplicable yet undeniable, timeless, playful moments that may be mixed with, we're hanging out and then one day parts of our shame show up and we're like, you know what?
Help.
Where I wouldn't have shared this and whatever, you know what? Can I pull you aside and just let you know what's coming up right now? I feel that that's the place I'm at more than ever, for you, for others, and I hope for myself as well too. Thank you for being that for so many people. And I look forward to dancing.
Yes. Yeah, we haven't festied in a while.
All Day I Dream, July 10th, I think.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I can go.
Yeah.
I love it. It was such a full circle. Like we started off 18 years ago we met and we partied together. And
yeah. What do you think, before we go, what does 18 years from now look like?
18 years from now looks like, I see family. I see like a little mini kid.
Family AI?
No. Like I'm going to birth a child.
Yeah. Bring life through you.
Yeah. Potentially God willing. And also birthing more beautiful things in the world that help people have a more pleasurable life.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah. Whatever that looks like.
I hear you being one of the beacons of saying yes to life. And that's enormous. And I think the world needs that it doesn't have to be through tech. It can be through the nature of who you are as a human.
I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Kaveh. Love you.
I love you too. All right. Bam.
Wow.
All right. Linnell.
We nailed it. We nailed it.
I'd like to thank Gina Oades for taking the time to be on the podcast. I also want to apologize to her for having taken so long for publishing it. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing the podcast if you feel that there are things that could be of benefit to anyone that's in your immediate surroundings or for the general population, if you'd like to share it there. After every podcast and any experience, it's important to take a few minutes to pause, contemplate, digest, and integrate some of the subjects that came alive that you came into contact with during. To the degree that we process things, it becomes more and more available to us, and us ultimately more available to life as well too. I look forward to joining you on the future episodes of this podcast. If you have any suggestions, please share them with me either in comments, through email, or in person. And thank you again for tuning in. See you again soon.